When Disney brought back DuckTales, it forged a new world for Donald Duck, Uncle Scrooge, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. One that pulled inspiration from comic books, animated features, video games, and television cartoons. This created a world that reflected a little bit of every version of Duckburg. Over the course of the first season, that world and its characters grew into their own, evolving into a fun, delightfully modern, and completely unique take on the iconic cast of Disney Ducks. Now that we've reached the season 1 finale, the show has outgrown the shadow that it was born in. It doesn't need to be an echo of the comics and cartoons that inspired it anymore. It can be something different, a nuanced reflection of something completely new. Itself. This is the Shadow War. If you haven't watched the first season of Disney's DuckTales reboot, consider this a spoiler warning. We're about to talk about the season finale. And this is a big one. Donald Duck, Uncle Scrooge, and the kids have been on legendary adventures, visited lands of myths, and explored the unknown. They've even solved a few mysteries that rewrite their family history, all while a sinister force grew in power right underneath their beaks, leading to this.
A final clash between the sorceress of the shadows and the world's greatest adventurer, Wait, what?
Magic to Dispel's surprise is justified. DuckTales' first season was more than just a parade of adventures. It was a trial for the Mcduck clan. After years apart, Scrooge McDuck finally reconnected with his family, only to have it fall apart under the weight of secrets, lies, and pride. That family tragedy not only derails the big showdown that Magic Dispel and the viewers have been waiting for, but it also resets the narrative back to where it was when the series started. Two halves of the same family, separated by bitter pride, resentment, and regret. Scrooge alone in his mansion, and Donald and the kids at the Duckburg Marina on the houseboat. This sets the perfect tone for the finale, making it clear from the opening shot that the season is going to end exactly the way it began, by bringing a family together. And it does that by harmonizing to notes that started with the series premiere, placing all the principal characters in roughly the same place they were when we first met them, but staging the narrative in reverse. So while the story of this episode is exciting and dramatic and satisfying all on its own, the way the finale frames that story with familiarity drawn from the rest of the season is what really brings it together. It's all the small touches that make me really love this episode. Like how the series premiere started by panning down to the Duckburg Marina, and how the season closer opens by panning down to that same arena from the vision of an evening moon, framing the two episodes as the literal sunrise and sunset of the show's first season. That's just perfection. There's a lot of other fun details too. Just as Huey served Uncle Donald a weird, gross fish breakfast in the first episode, Donald tries to give the kids an equally unappetizing snack as they move back into the houseboat. In fact, there are a lot of details like this. From the way the family was leaving the boat in the first episode and returning to it now, to simple dialogue choices that call back to things said in the premiere. All of this just goes to highlight how much love and care the DuckTales crew have put into this show. Everything about it just shines. The staging, the setup, the jokes, the callbacks, and the story. And if you're somehow not caught up on that story, don't worry about it. Launchpad takes a moment to dump a rambling mess of exposition at Uncle Scrooge just to make sure you're caught up.
I'm not here to check on you on account of everyone moving out because the boys blame you for launching their mom into space and orphaning them.
Even this shows how far DuckTales has come in mastering its characters. This gag relies on two tropes that normally annoy me. Exposition simply for the benefit of the viewer, and a character that's kind of too dumb to exist. And it's true, a lot of the time I think Launchpad is kind of just a little too ridiculous to be believable, but they doubled down on it for this scene in a way that actually works. I mean, it's true that no reasonable or realistic character would talk this way about a situation like this. But it's also true that this is completely consistent with the version of Launchpad we've met this season. I mean, yeah, Launchpad is too dumb, but DuckTales has earned the silly exposition dump. And that same rule works for Magica Dispel. We haven't spent much time with Magica so far, but the show has made a point of showing us how obsessive and narcissistic she is. To the point that her monologuing to herself and rambling about her plan to get revenge on Uncle Scrooge here just doesn't feel that out of place. which leaves us, the viewer, ready to jump right in with Magica as she uses Lina'S body to sneak into Scrooge's mansion for revenge.
It's me, that insufferable whelp, Lina. The little urchins invited me over to, what do children like? Play marbles?
Somehow, this actually works, and Scrooge lets who he thinks is his housekeeper's granddaughter's best friend into his house so he can gloat about how he's winning the family crisis.
So how are my so-called kin? Miserable, no doubt? I'm obviously doing much better than they are.
He's not. Scrooge is devastated. After years of being alone, he finally found what his life of adventure had been missing. A family to share it with. For a few brief months, he had that family, and he lost it, just like he had lost Donald and Della. As Scrooge is trying to come to terms with what he lost, Magica is trying to trick him into drinking some tea laced with some kind of knockout potion. At the same time, Magica's fighting Lina, who keeps trying to get control of her body back. And the visual style of this struggle is amazing. Every time Lina gets enough control to talk back to her aunt, Magica is literally poured out of Lina's eyes with the force of a vomitous exorcism. It walks this dramatic line between sickness and sadness, simultaneously looking like Lina is both weeping and physically ill. Either way, Scrooge's depression is so out of character for him, Magica simply can't accept it as genuine. She's convinced he's trying to outsmart her, until she finally realizes he's hit rock bottom.
Oh my word, it's not a trap. He's actually become this pathetic.
This isn't the showdown Magica had been hoping for, so she briefly turns away from being a villain to being the reality check Scrooge needs to get back on his feet.
Toughen up, man. You're Scrooge McDuck. Act like it.
The pep talk works just enough to knock Scrooge out of his sulk, and she takes him off guard and steals the dime, giving Magica to spell enough magical power to return to her own body and trap Scrooge and Lina in a cage of magic. That's all pretty intense, but it's only like half the story so far. Remember how this whole dramatic showdown started with Launchpad visiting the mansion to drop a bunch of exposition? When Scrooge turned him away, he drove to the other end of town, meeting Donald and his family at the Duckburg Marina, where the kids are coping with the separation of their family in their own way. They're also getting ready to leave Duckburg behind forever.
Thanks for that! We're moving there tomorrow!
They're moving tomorrow?
This part of the episode is way more lighthearted. We follow Webby and Launchpad as they try to organize a farce of a farewell party designed to convince the Duck family to stay and reunite with their Uncle Scrooge and stay in Duckburg. The stakes are still pretty high. The boys are the only family Webby has really ever known. But it's still largely a fun, goofy, harebrained scheme right out of a 1990s sitcom. Even so, Webby's subtle approach isn't working. So Mrs. Beakley throws all delicacy out the window and delivers a completely ridiculous, ham-fisted speech laying out the facts.
I understand. You're upset because you lost one family member, which was terrible and painful. So you decided you should go ahead and lose another. Brilliant.
It's pretty inelegant, actually, but it's also a huge reality check. So far, this entire family split is the result of a misunderstanding, but Beakley lays it all out on the table. Scrooge was wrong to keep a secret, but it was an accident, and he's just as heartbroken as the kids.
But I'm just the housekeeper. What do I know?
A lot! This lady knows a lot!
At the same time the kids are starting to realize how unfair they were to their Uncle Scrooge, Lina is back at the mansion helping their uncle understand what he's leaving behind.
You fight and get into trouble, but it doesn't matter because you, I don't know, love each other or something. Dude, I wish I had your family.
Unfortunately, before Scrooge can hatch a plan to reunite with his family, Magica decides to finally take her revenge, trapping Lina in her shadow and imprisoning Uncle Scrooge in his own lucky dime. It's the worst possible timing. Back on the houseboat, Donald and the boys had just decided that the family had been broken up for too long, and they resolved to forgive their uncle. But it's too late. Magica has reached her full power. It's at this moment that the episode completely changes gears, switching from a story that really dives deep into the characters to an action-packed adventure. Magica bursts out of the mansion and flies to the money bin, stealing the shadows of the citizens of Duckburg along the way. She breaks the walls of the bin and perches herself on a throne made of Scrooge's money. It's awesome, and it's the start of an epic battle, and we'll get to that. But before we do, I want to stop and appreciate that the show decided to let the Mcduck clan solve its family crisis pretty much on their own. It would have been easy to start this episode with action, forcing Donald, the kids, and Scrooge to come together and resolve their issues in the heat of adventure. But instead, it slowed things down, letting both sides of the quarrel stew in their anger and hurt. We got to spend time with Scrooge as he grieved and moped, and we walked with Huey, Dewey, and Louie as they channeled their feelings of betrayal into righteous anger. And in both cases, they were brought back to their senses by someone close to the other side of their family, with Mrs. Beakley and Lena offering perspectives that they just weren't seeing on their own. And that's important because it shows the viewer that the family was always going to be okay, even if they never got to the big adventure. By showing both sides of the family resolving to reconcile before that adventure starts, it shows us that Magica isn't what brought them back together. It was the strength of their own family that did. It's maybe my favorite thing about the episode, and that's saying a lot because it's not even half over. As Donald, Beakley, and the kids watch Magica attack the bin, they get a few stowaways. Gyro and his team climb aboard the houseboat from the underwater lab. Together, they need to hatch a plan to save Uncle Scrooge. There's only one problem.
What? Did anyone get any of that?
Yeah. Nobody can understand Donald Duck. Not even the people in the DuckTales universe. It's a fun joke, but it also raises a unique question. When you read Donald Duck comics, you can always understand what Donald is saying. But in the show and cartoons, he's completely unintelligible.
Mostly context clues. We get like every third word. Nope, completely unintelligible.
I don't think Disney has ever addressed the difference between Donald's on-screen speech impediment and his clarity of voice in the classic Carl Barks comic books. At least not until now.
I don't have time for this. The Barksian modulator, able to translate neural impulses into sonic transmissions.
You heard that right. Gyro invented a voice box called the Barksonian modulator. And yes, it does exactly what you think it does.
You mad scientist?
For the first time ever, we can finally understand Donald Duck, because suddenly, he's voiced by Don Cheadle.
What makes a duck tick? What does a duck want? What will a duck sacrifice for what he wants?
At first, this is played as a joke. Donald is suddenly incredibly brave, daring, and comes up with a smart, considered plan of attack, seemingly the opposite of the clumsy, short-tempered duck we've come to know and love. It almost seems like Donald is going to be out of character for the rest of the episode. But he's not. Despite the slightly jarring, manly voice coming out of his beak, this might be one of the most true portrayals of Donald Duck ever put to screen. I'm serious. Once you get past how distractingly intelligent he sounds, you'll see Donald all over this performance. He sees himself as smart, brave, and clever. He only looks silly to us. And this comes across multiple times in the episode. We see the new, overprotective, angry parent Donald when he tells the kids to stay on the docks during the rescue operation.
Under no circumstances are you kids to come to the bin. Do you understand?
Yes, Uncle Donald.
We see the classic rage of the cartoon Donald when he's fighting the shadows later in the episode.
Come and get it, you no good.
We can even hear it in the way he talks. He's more clear and he's using a few words he couldn't pronounce before, but he's still totally in character. And it's a really fun twist to see what Donald would be like on screen if we could see him as he sees himself. And because he now can finally be that duck he sees himself as, he has the presence to take the lead, even surprising Mrs. Beakley with a solid plan of attack.
We need to
stage a coordinated attack.
That is actually very close to what I was going to say.
The vocal clarity of everything he says makes it sound so serious and heroic. But if you really stop to think about it, if he said any of these things in his regular voice, he'd sound completely ridiculous. Anyway, Donald has given everybody a task in the rescue operation except the kids, who he tells to stay out of trouble. So, naturally, they don't. Webby takes the kids to Duckburg's abandoned Bayside amphitheater, Lena's hideout, to try and enlist her to help in the rescue. They don't know she's already been banished to the Shadow Realm by Magica, or that she's part of the reason they even need to rescue their Uncle Scrooge in the first place. But they find out.
Lina is Magica's spy?
She was never my friend.
It's a heartbreaking moment for Webby. Not only has she lost her friend, but she now has to face the possibility that Lina was never really her friend in the first place. Despite this blow, the kids vow to break into the conquered money bin, get the dime, and rescue their uncle, who is being relentlessly taunted by Magica.
Is this your favorite treasure? Oh, too bad. Now it's ice cream.
So much happens during the battle for Scrooge's freedom that it's kind of hard to keep track of. Gyro and his interns are storming the front gates. Launchpad is trying to crash the Sun Chaser into the bin itself, and Donald is sneaking under the bridge as Beakley tries to fight the shadows overrunning his houseboat. All the while, the kids are swimming underneath Duckburg Bay, sneaking into the bin through Gyro's destroyed lab. And this was apparently Donald's plan all along.
I told you not to come, so of course you showed up, and just when I need you.
Classic reverse psychology. Feel like I should have seen that coming.
I mean, Donald's silly, but he's not a fool. He knows the kids never listen to him, and he sends them into the bin to rescue Scrooge as he keeps the shadows at bay. In the bin, each of the kids use their unique strengths to fight Magica. Huey goads her with incessant questions about her plan and how her magic works, while Louie tricks her into lowering her guard by making up a fake but completely hilarious curse.
What kind of curse?
Grave misfortune, increased gullibility, a swift kick in the ribs.
A what? Ah, my ribs!
This creates an opening for Webby and Dewey to go in on the attack to take back Scrooge's dime. They're not the only kids with skin in this game either. Just when it looks like Magica is going to gain the upper hand, Webby's friendship bracelet starts to glow, reflects the attack back, and gives Lina a chance to escape Magica's shadow.
Get away from my best friend, Aunt Magica!
It's briefly awesome, but the reunion doesn't last long. And we'll get to that heartbreak later. But it's Lina'S Sacrifice that allows Dewey to finally grab Scrooge's #1 dime away from Magica, ultimately allowing him to free his uncle by using that lucky dime to deflect one of her magical attacks.
Way to dispel your own spell, Dispel!
The now free Scrooge confidently pits his cane against Magica's staff, and the short battle that follows is a delightful treat. This smirking, smooth-talking Scrooge is the brazen, bold adventurer the show has been hinting at the whole season, but now his smugness is tempered with pride in his family. So it's fitting then that the final blow to Magica isn't dealt by Scrooge and his cane, but by Donald's clumsiness, an epic stumble that accidentally destroys Magica Dispel's staff.
Huh? I got it!
Come on guys, he may have a smooth voice now, but this guy is still Donald Duck. Without her powers, Magica has nothing left to do but run away, leaving Scrooge and his family to celebrate. Well, sort of. Webby is only just realizing what she's lost.
Lina's gone.
She'll always be with you.
It's a sad ending for Webby, at least for now, but her shadow reveals that Lina's story isn't quite over yet. We don't know if Lina really was Magica's niece, or just some sort of shadow minion who had a heart of gold. We'll have to wait until later to find that out. For now though, the season finale ends just like I said, by reuniting Scrooge McDuck with his family. This is exactly the ending we expected, but I appreciate it all the more because of how it was done. The season closer took the care to harmonize itself with the series premiere and the rest of the show. The entire episode is littered with nods and callbacks to the stories that preceded it, and all those echoes are most noticeable right here at the end, in the lines each character says in the episode's closing moments. It starts with Webby.
I'm gonna eat a hamburger.
We could bring you a hamburger.
You really are my best friend. Huh. I guess she really was my best friend.
It continues as Scrooge welcomes the boys back into his life.
Huey, Louie, the third one. You kids are nothing but trouble! Curse me kilts, have I missed trouble? Huey, Louie, the third one. Curse me kilts, have I missed you?
And Donald completes the sequence by echoing Launchpad and plainly stating the entire point of DuckTales.
Aw, family truly is the greatest adventure of all. Oh no, the ground!
Family truly is the greatest.
Or at least he would have if the Barksonian modulator didn't give out. The season finale was filled with adventure, with amazing jokes, with animation that's the best we've seen yet in this show. It revived Magica De Spell as a wholly new version of the character that radiates charisma, humor, and an intoxicating personality that embodies the idea of mad revenge. It surpassed my expectations in every single way. And it was these harmonizing echoes that called back to the rest of the season that really drove that home for me. I had doubts going into the first season of DuckTales. It's true, I wanted to like it from the get-go, but it was a show that had everything going against it. It had to live in the shadow of not only the classic 1990s Disney afternoon cartoon, but the legacy of decades of comic books penned by world-class artists. That's a lot of nostalgia to overcome. And in a world where reboot backlash is the assumed default reaction, it's an insurmountable task. But somehow, DuckTales did it. This show is more than a pretender to a legacy of Disney Ducks. It was brave enough to forge new versions of classic characters, but still smart enough to respect the legacy of the versions of these characters that came before. Some of them changed drastically, but the spirit of those characters and the worlds that inspired it are very much still alive within them. And that's how you make a good reboot. Not by living in the shadow of what came before, but by casting your own shadow, and by winning that shadow war. So much more has happened in this episode and season than I could ever cram into one video. So I'll leave you with one final callback to the series premiere, an important thematic echo and answer to the painting of Della Duck that Dewey discovered at the end of the show's first story.
Boys?
I can't wait to see what this show does next.